In a small, picturesque coastal town where the ocean kissed the shore and the air carried the scent of salt and blooming flowers, there lived two people whose love story had captured the hearts of everyone around them. Emma and Liam were not just any couple. They were the kind of pair that made strangers smile when they walked by, holding hands and laughing like the world was theirs for the taking. Their journey to this point hadn't been easy. Both had faced their fair share of struggles. Emma with her dreams of becoming an artist constantly overshadowed by financial hardships, and Liam, who worked tirelessly as a mechanic while caring for his younger siblings after losing their parents. But somehow fate had brought them together in the most unexpected way. It all started at a local cafe where Emma often went to sketch during her free time. One rainy afternoon, she noticed a man sitting across from her trying to fix a broken bicycle chain with tools spread out on the table. Intrigued, she struck up a conversation, asking if he needed help. What began as a simple exchange turned into hours of talking about life, art, and dreams. By the end of the day, neither wanted to leave. That chance meeting blossomed into something deeper over the months that followed. They supported each other through thick and thin, finding joy even in the smallest moments, a shared meal, a sunset watched from the beach, or a quiet evening spent painting and tinkering with old car parts. There, families quickly warmed up to the idea of their relationship, seeing how much happiness they brought into each other's lives. When Liam finally got down on one knee under a starlit sky, proposing with a ring he'd saved every penny to buy, Emma said yes, without hesitation. The news spread like wildfire through the tight-knit community, and soon, everyone was buzzing, with excitement about the upcoming wedding. It wasn't going to be some extravagant affair. Neither of them cared for flashy displays, but rather a heartfelt celebration of their love, surrounded by the people who mattered most. Months of planning went into making the day perfect. Emma poured her creative energy into designing invitations adorned with delicate floral patterns, while Liam took charge of arranging music for the reception. Every detail was thoughtfully chosen, from the soft ivory dresses of the bridesmaids to the rustic wooden archway decorated with garlands of wildflowers. The venue itself, St. Mary's Chapel, was nestled atop a hill overlooking the sea, its stained glass windows casting colorful hues onto the stone floors. On the morning of Vidor, the big day, the entire town seemed alive with anticipation. Children ran through the streets clutching handfuls of confetti, and shopkeepers hung banners wishing the couple well. As Emma stood before the mirror in her mother's childhood home, adjusting the lace veil pinned carefully into her hair, she couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. Nervousness, excitement, and an overwhelming sense of gratitude washed over her. Her best friend and maid of honor, Sarah, dabbed away tears as she helped smooth out the train of Emma's gown. "You look absolutely stunning," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Outside, the sound of waves crashing against the rocks mingled with the distant hum of guests arriving at the chapel. Meanwhile, Liam paced nervously outside the chapel doors, his fingers drumming against the pocket watch his late father had given him years ago. His groomsmen tried to lighten the mood with jokes, but Liam barely heard them. All he could think about was the woman waiting to walk down the aisle toward him, the woman who had changed his life in ways he never imagined possible. He glanced up at the clear blue sky, silently thanking whoever might be listening for bringing Emma into his world. The ceremony itself was nothing short of magical. As Emma stepped inside, escorted by her beaming uncle, the congregation rose to their feet, eyes wide with admiration. She moved slowly, her eyes locked onto Liam's, who stood frozen at the altar, unable to believe how breathtakingly beautiful she looked. When she reached him, he took her hand, his grip firm yet gentle, as though afraid she might disappear. The officiant's words flowed like poetry, weaving together promises of love, loyalty, and partnership. Friends and family wiped away tears, some chuckling softly as Liam stumbled over his vows, his voice cracking with emotion. When the moment came for them to seal their union with a kiss, the room erupted in applause. The newlyweds turned to face their loved ones, their faces glowing with joy. Sunlight streamed through the windows, bathing them in golden light as if nature itself was celebrating alongside them. Little did anyone know, however, that beneath the surface of this seemingly perfect day, an invisible threat lingered, an ominous shadow that would soon cast its dark cloud over the festivities. For now, though, the only thing on everyone's mind was the radiant couple standing before them, ready to embark on the rest of their lives together. As the newlyweds stepped out of St. Mary's Chapel, the world outside seemed to mirror the happiness radiating from their faces. The sun was beginning its slow descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. A gentle breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers mingling with the faint aroma of salt from the nearby ocean. Guests spilled out onto the stone steps, eager to catch a glimpse of Emma and Liam as they made their way to the waiting car that would take them to the reception hall just down the road. Confetti rained down around them, catching the light like tiny sparks of celebration. Children giggled as they tossed handfuls into the air, while older relatives clapped and cheered, shouting words of congratulations. Emma paused for a moment, at the top of the steps, her hand resting lightly on Liam's arm. She turned back to smile at the crowd, her veil fluttering softly behind her. Her eyes sparkled with joy, though there was something else, a fleeting flicker of discomfort that passed so quickly no one noticed. For a brief second, she had tasted something strange, almost metallic, on her tongue. It wasn't unpleasant exactly, but it was unusual enough to make her pause. She glanced at Liam, wondering if he felt it too, but his expression remained unchanged, bright, warm, and full of love. Deciding it must have been her imagination playing tricks on her nerves, she shook off the thought and focused instead on soaking in every detail of this unforgettable moment. The photographer called out to them, urging them to pose for a few more pictures before heading to the reception. Emma adjusted her bouquet, which overflowed with vibrant blooms, roses, lilies, and sprigs of greenery carefully arranged by the florist who had promised to make everything perfect. Liam wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her close, as the camera clicked. They laughed together when one of the flower petals fell loose, landing softly on the ground between them. Someone joked about how even nature wanted to join in the festivities, drawing laughter from those gathered nearby. But amidst the merriment, an elderly woman standing near the edge of the group frowned slightly. Mrs. Thompson, known for her sharp intuition and old-fashioned superstitions, muttered under her breath about omens, after noticing a flock of birds suddenly take flight from the trees without any apparent reason. No one paid much attention to her. After all, Mrs. Thompson often saw patterns where others didn't. When the photo session ended, Emma and Liam climbed into the vintage car decorated with ribbons and flowers. The driver tipped his hat and started the engine, waving goodbye to the cheering crowd as they pulled away. The short drive to the reception hall gave them a rare moment of privacy, allowing them to breathe deeply and reflect on what had just happened. "Can you believe it?" Liam asked, his voice tinged with awe. "We're married, you're my wife." Emma giggled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "And you're my husband," she replied, her heart swelling with emotion. Yet, as they drove along the winding coastal road, Liam shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He placed a hand over his chest, rubbing it absent-mindedly. "I don't know why, but I feel weird," he admitted. "Like my heart is racing or something." Emma sat up straighter, concern flashing across her face. "Are you okay? Is it nerves?" she asked, reaching out to touch his arm. Liam forced a smile, trying to reassure her. "Yeah, probably just excitement. Or maybe I ate too fast during breakfast," he joked weakly. Still, the unease lingered. By the time they arrived at the reception hall, a charming seaside venue with large windows overlooking the water, they were both feeling a bit off, though neither voiced it aloud. After all, this was supposed to be the happiest day of their lives. Surely whatever discomfort they felt would pass once the festivities began. Inside, the room buzzed with energy. Tables draped in crisp white linens stood ready, adorned with elegant centerpieces matching the floral arrangements from the ceremony. Strings of fairy lights twinkled above, casting a soft glow over the space. Music played softly in the background as guests mingled, sipping champagne and nibbling on whores. D'oeuvre, When Emma and Liam entered holding hands tightly, the room erupted into applause once again. Friends rushed forward to hug them, offering heartfelt wishes for their future together. Family members wiped away tears, marveling at how perfect the couple looked. Dinner was served shortly afterward, and the newlyweds took their seats at the head table. Around them, conversations flowed effortlessly, punctuated by bursts of laughter and clinking glasses. As the evening wore on, the atmosphere grew livelier. Speeches were delivered, each one filled with anecdotes and well-wishes that brought smiles and occasional tears to everyone present. When it came time for the traditional cutting of the cake, Liam stood up first, offering his hand to Emma. She accepted it gracefully, rising to join him at the front of the room. Together, they gripped the ornate knife provided by the catering staff, slicing through the layers of rich chocolate and vanilla sponge. But as they fed each other bites of the sweet dessert, something was clearly wrong. Emma's hands trembled ever so slightly as she lifted her fork to Liam's lips. He chuckled nervously, brushing it off as nerves, but then he froze, gripping the edge of the tablecloth. His face paled visibly, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. "Liam?" Emma whispered, her voice tinged with alarm. Across the room, a few guests exchanged worried glances. At first, they assumed it was simply stage fright or perhaps the heat of the moment catching up to him. However, when Emma herself swayed unsteadily, nearly dropping the plate in her hands, murmurs of concern rippled through the crowd. Mrs. Thompson, still seated near the back of the room, leaned closer to her neighbor. "Something isn't right," she said firmly, her earlier suspicions resurfacing. Others dismissed her comments, chalking it up to paranoia, but moments later, the situation escalated dramatically. Emma stumbled backward, her legs giving way beneath her. Liam reached out instinctively to catch her, only to collapse himself. Gasps echoed through the hall as the couple crumpled to the floor, clutching at their chests and gasping for air. Chaos erupted instantly. Chairs scraped against the floor as people jumped to their feet, rushing toward the fallen pair. Someone shouted for help, while another guest dialed emergency services frantically. Within minutes, paramedics arrived, pushing through the panicked crowd with medical kits in hand. The sight of the uniformed responders sent a wave of dread through the room. Loved ones watched in horror as Emma and Liam were loaded onto stretchers, their faces pale and lifeless despite the frantic efforts of the medical team. Tears streamed down cheeks as friends and family followed the ambulance to the hospital, praying for a miracle. But deep down, many couldn't shake the gnawing sense that something terrible had already occurred, and that the answers lay hidden somewhere within the very celebration meant to honor love and new beginnings. The ambulance sped through the narrow coastal roads, its siren wailing into the evening air like a cry for help. Inside, the paramedics worked tirelessly, their movements swift and precise as they tried to stabilize Emma and Liam. The newlyweds lay side by side on stretchers, their faces pale and drawn, their breathing shallow and labored. Despite the chaos surrounding them, there was an eerie stillness about the couple, as if they had already slipped beyond reach. One of the medics called out vital signs over the din, his voice strained with urgency, but the numbers only worsened with each passing second. Emma's pulse fluttered weakly, while Liam's heart rate spiked erratically before dropping dangerously low. Outside, the sky that had been so radiant just moments ago now seemed darker, heavier, as though it too bore witness to the tragedy unfolding below. Guests who had followed the ambulance in their cars parked haphazardly near the hospital entrance, spilling out onto the pavement in tears. Some clung to one another for support, unable to process what was happening. Others paced back and forth, clutching their phones, desperate to call someone, anyone, who might make sense of this nightmare. The reception hall, once alive with laughter and joy, felt like a distant memory now, replaced by fear and confusion. Inside the emergency room, doctors and nurses scrambled to understand what had caused such a sudden and severe reaction. Blood tests were rushed, oxygen masks were secured over the couple's faces, and IV lines were inserted to deliver fluids and medication. But no matter what they did, Emma and Liam's conditions continued to deteriorate. Their bodies seemed locked in a battle against an invisible enemy, one that defied explanation. "It's not a heart attack," one doctor muttered, shaking his head as he reviewed the preliminary results. "And there's no sign of poisoning. At least nothing we can detect right away." As minutes ticked by, the tension in the room grew unbearable. Nurses exchanged worried glances, unsure of what else to try. Outside in the waiting area, family members sat huddled together, praying silently or sobbing uncontrollably. Emma's mother held her husband's hand tightly, her knuckles white with anxiety. "They're strong," she whispered, though her voice trembled. "They'll pull through. They have to." Liam's younger sister, barely 18, buried her face in her hands, overwhelmed by guilt. She had teased him earlier that morning about being nervous, never imagining how profoundly those nerves would manifest. Then came the moment everyone dreaded. A senior doctor emerged from the treatment room, his expression grim. He approached the gathered family members, removing his gloves slowly, a gesture that felt deliberate, almost painful. "I'm so sorry," he began, his voice heavy with sorrow. "We did everything we could, but they passed away shortly after arriving here." The words hit like a tidal wave, crashing over the group and leaving devastation in their wake. Gasps turned to screams, and chairs scraped against the floor as people struggled to stand, to move, to comprehend the incomprehensible. 7 agonizing minutes. That was all it took for 2 vibrant lives to be extinguished. The news spread quickly, first within the hospital walls and then beyond. Friends who hadn't made it to the scene received frantic calls, their phones lighting up with messages they couldn't bear to read. Social media erupted with posts of disbelief and grief, photos of Emma and Liam flooding timelines accompanied by captions like, "This can't be real," and "How could this happen?" Strangers who had attended the wedding recounted details from earlier in the day, searching for clues they might have missed. Had Emma looked unusually pale during the ceremony? Was Liam sweating more than normal when they danced at the reception? Every detail, no matter how small, was scrutinized under the weight of hindsight. Back at the hospital, authorities arrived to begin their investigation. Detectives questioned witnesses, jotting down notes as guests recounted the events leading up to the collapse. One woman mentioned seeing Liam rub his chest during dinner, while another recalled Emma commenting on a strange taste in her mouth. Mrs. Thompson, the elderly guest who had earlier spoken of omens, hesitated before sharing her observation about the birds fleeing the trees. Though some dismissed her remarks as superstition, investigators noted them carefully, unwilling to overlook any potential lead. Meanwhile, the florist responsible for the wedding arrangements received a phone call late that night. At first, she thought it was a routine check-in, perhaps someone wanting to thank her for the beautiful bouquets. But as the caller explained the situation, her blood ran cold. "What do you mean they died?" she stammered, her hands trembling as she gripped the receiver. When asked about the flowers, she froze, her mind racing back to the delivery truck that had arrived earlier that week. A mix-up at the supplier's warehouse had resulted in a rare, highly toxic plant being included among the decorative greenery. It wasn't supposed to happen, it shouldn't have happened, but it had, and now the consequences were unimaginable. As dawn broke over the horizon, casting a pale light over the sleepy coastal town, the reality of the tragedy began to sink in. The streets that had been filled with celebration just hours earlier now felt eerily quiet, as if the entire community was holding its breath. Neighbors peeked out of windows, whispering to one another about what had occurred. Children who had tossed confetti earlier in the day now clung to their parents, sensing the shift in mood. Even the ocean seemed subdued, its waves lapping gently against the shore without the usual roar. At the hospital, a makeshift memorial began to form outside the entrance. Flowers, candles, and handwritten notes piled up, creating a poignant tribute to the young couple whose lives had ended far too soon. Someone placed a framed photo of Emma and Liam on their wedding day at the center of the display, capturing their radiant smiles frozen in time. Passers-by stopped to pay their respects, many leaving in tears. Among them was Sarah, Emma's best friend and maid of honor, who knelt beside the memorial, clutching a tissue. "You were supposed to grow old together," she whispered, her voice breaking. You were supposed to build a life full of love and happiness. For the families left behind, the days that followed were a blur of shock, grief, and unanswered questions. Emma's parents retreated into themselves, struggling to come to terms with the loss of their daughter on what should have been the happiest day of her life. Her father spent hours staring at old photographs, tracing her smiling face with his fingers as if trying to hold on to her presence just a little longer. Her mother threw herself into organizing mementos from the wedding, determined to preserve every last detail of the day that had started with so much promise. Liam's siblings, meanwhile, grappled with losing not only a brother, but also the person who had stepped into the role of parent after their own parents' deaths. His youngest sister refused to leave his room, curling up on his bed surrounded by his belongings. His older brother took charge of handling practical matters, speaking with lawyers and insurance agents, though his voice cracked whenever he mentioned Liam's name. The weight of their loss was unbearable, compounded by the knowledge that it could have been prevented. In the midst of the mourning, anger began to surface. How could something like this happen? Why hadn't anyone caught the mistake sooner? Questions swirled endlessly, fueling outrage and demands for accountability. The florist issued a public apology, her words filled with remorse but offering little comfort to those affected. Legal action was inevitable, and discussions about stricter regulations in the floral industry gained traction. Yet even as these conversations unfolded, the pain remained raw, a constant reminder of the fragility of life and the devastating impact of human error. And so, the town that had once celebrated Emma and Liam's union found itself united instead, in grief. The tragedy cast a long shadow, touching everyone who had known the couple, or even simply heard their story. For some, it served as a stark reminder to cherish every moment with loved ones, knowing how quickly things could change. For others, it sparked a determination to fight for change, ensuring that no other couple would suffer the same fate. But regardless of how people chose to respond, one thing was certain. Emma and Liam's love had left an indelible mark on the world, even as their lives were tragically cut short. The days following the tragedy unfolded like a storm cloud settling over the small coastal town. What had begun as a day of celebration quickly transformed into a somber investigation, with authorities determined to uncover the truth behind Emma and Liam's sudden and inexplicable deaths. Detectives combed through every detail of the wedding, retracing the couple's final hours in painstaking fashion. They interviewed guests, examined photographs, and even revisited the chapel and reception hall, searching for anything that might explain what had gone wrong. One of the first breakthroughs came when investigators focused on the floral arrangements. The vibrant bouquets and centerpieces that had adorned the ceremony and reception were taken away for testing, their beauty now overshadowed by suspicion. It didn't take long for forensic experts to identify traces of a rare and highly toxic plant hidden among the greenery. Known as aconitum, or wolfsbane, the plant was infamous for its lethal properties. Even minimal exposure could cause severe reactions, including respiratory failure and cardiac arrest, the very symptoms Emma and Liam had exhibited before collapsing. When questioned, the florist responsible for the arrangements broke down in tears, confessing to the mix-up. She explained that the flowers had been delivered from a supplier earlier in the week, and due to an oversight at the warehouse, bundles of wolfsbane had been mistakenly labeled as decorative foliage. Unaware of the deadly mistake, she had incorporated them into the bouquets and table decorations without a second thought. "I never meant for this to happen," she sobbed during her interview with detectives. "I would never have used those plants if I'd known." While the discovery provided answers, it also raised unsettling questions. How had such a critical error slipped through the cracks? Why hadn't anyone noticed the unusual appearance of the toxic leaves? And most importantly, why had Emma and Liam been affected so severely while others at the wedding seemed unharmed? Investigators turned their attention to these lingering mysteries, piecing together fragments of information from witnesses and medical reports. Guests who attended the wedding began recalling subtle signs they hadn't initially paid attention to. Several mentioned feeling lightheaded or unusually fatigued during the reception, though they attributed it to the heat or excitement of the day. One guest, a nurse by profession, remembered commenting to her husband that the air inside the reception hall felt heavy, almost suffocating. Another recalled seeing a few people step outside for fresh air, complaining of headaches or nausea. At the time, no one had thought much of it. After all, large gatherings often left attendees feeling tired or overwhelmed. But now, those minor complaints took on new significance. Medical experts theorized that prolonged exposure to the toxin might have played a role in Emma and Liam's tragic fate. As the newlyweds, they had been surrounded by the floral arrangements throughout the entire event, from holding bouquets during the ceremony to standing near centerpieces at the reception. Their close proximity, combined with potential inhalation of airborne particles or direct contact with the contaminated foliage, likely resulted in higher levels of exposure compared to other guests. Additionally, individual sensitivities could have exacerbated the effects. Some people may have been more susceptible to the toxin than others, explaining why only Emma and Liam succumbed. As news of the toxic flowers spread, shockwaves rippled through the community. Residents expressed outrage and disbelief, unable to fathom how something so preventable could lead to such devastating consequences. Social media lit up with posts calling for accountability, not just from the florist, but from the entire supply chain involved in the mishap. Petitions circulated online demanding stricter regulations and mandatory safety checks for floral deliveries, particularly for events like weddings, where large crowds gathered in enclosed spaces. The florist herself became the target of public scrutiny. Her name splashed across headlines alongside accusations of negligence. Her business crumbled overnight, leaving her financially ruined and emotionally shattered. Friends and colleagues rallied around her, arguing that she was not solely to blame for the tragedy. She made a mistake, yes, one longtime customer wrote in a local newspaper op-ed, but punishing her won't bring Emma and Liam back. We need to focus on preventing this from happening again. Legal proceedings soon followed, adding another layer of complexity to the already overwhelming situation. Lawyers representing Emma and Liam's families filed lawsuits against the florist, the supplier, and even the venue, alleging gross negligence. Courtrooms buzzed with tension as evidence was presented, each side presenting arguments about responsibility and liability. For the families, the legal battle offered little solace. While they wanted justice for their loved ones, nothing could undo the pain of losing Emma and Liam so suddenly and senselessly. Amidst the chaos, Mrs. Thompson, the elderly woman who had spoken of omens on the wedding day, found herself reflecting on the fragility of life. Though many dismissed her warnings as superstition, she couldn't shake the feeling that there were lessons to be learned from the tragedy. "We think we're in control," she told a neighbor one evening, sitting on her porch as the sun dipped below the horizon. "But sometimes things happen that remind us how delicate everything really is." Her words resonated deeply within the community, prompting conversations about gratitude, mindfulness, and cherishing the moments we often take for granted. For Emma and Liam's immediate families, coping with the loss proved unimaginably difficult. Each day brought a fresh wave of grief, compounded by the knowledge that their deaths could have been avoided. Emma's mother channeled her anguish into advocacy work, partnering with organizations dedicated to improving safety standards in the floral industry. She gave interviews, wrote articles, and spoke at conferences, sharing her story in hopes of preventing similar tragedies. "If my daughter's death can save even one life," she said during one emotional speech, "then maybe her sacrifice won't be in vain." Liam's siblings, still reeling from the loss of their brother, struggled to find meaning in the devastation. His youngest sister poured her emotions into writing, filling journals with letters addressed to Liam that she knew he would never read. His older brother threw himself into volunteer work, helping organize fundraisers to support families affected by workplace accidents and oversights. Together, they vowed to honor Liam's memory by living lives filled with purpose and kindness, qualities he had embodied during his short time on Earth. Meanwhile, the town itself began to heal in its own way. Neighbors came together to create a permanent memorial for Emma and Liam, transforming a quiet corner of the park overlooking the ocean into a serene garden. Volunteers planted safe, vibrant flowers chosen specifically to symbolize love, resilience, and hope. A plaque bearing their names and wedding dates stood at the center, inscribed with a simple yet powerful message: forever united in love, forever remembered in our hearts. Visitors often stop by the garden to reflect, leaving tokens of remembrance or simply sitting quietly amidst the blooms. On anniversaries, friends released lanterns into the night sky, watching as they drifted upward like whispers carried to the heavens. Some claimed to feel the presence of Emma and Liam, a gentle breeze brushing against their cheeks or the faint scent of roses lingering in the air, and believed they watched over the living, ensuring their legacy endured. Though the tragedy cast a shadow over the town, it also served as a catalyst for change. New safety protocols were implemented across industries, requiring stricter inspections and clearer labeling for potentially hazardous materials. Florists underwent additional training to recognize dangerous plants, and suppliers faced increased accountability for errors in their shipments. Slowly but surely, the community began to rebuild, guided by the belief that even in the face of unimaginable loss, there was always room for growth and transformation. Emma and Liam's story became a poignant reminder of the importance of vigilance, compassion, and unity. Their love, though tragically cut short, inspired countless others to cherish their relationships, advocate for safer practices, and embrace life with renewed appreciation. And while the wound left by their passing would never fully heal, their memory lived on, not as victims of circumstance but as symbols of enduring love and resilience in the face of adversity. The aftermath of Emma and Liam's deaths left a deep scar on the community, one that would take years to heal, if it ever truly did. Grief settled like a thick fog over the coastal town, wrapping itself around every home, every heart. For those who had known the couple personally, the pain was unbearable, a constant ache that refused to fade. Friends and family members carried their loss differently, each finding their own way to navigate the uncharted waters of sorrow. Yet no matter how they coped, guilt lingered heavily in the air, casting shadows over even the smallest moments of peace. Emma's mother, Margaret, bore the weight of her daughter's death with a quiet strength that masked the turmoil within. She spent countless hours sitting in Emma's old room, surrounded by sketches and half-finished paintings, tracing her fingers over the edges of canvases as if trying to reconnect with the spirit of her child. Her husband, John, watched helplessly as his wife retreated further into herself, unsure of how to bridge the growing distance between them. "I should have noticed something," Margaret whispered one night, staring out the window at the darkened ocean. "If only I'd asked more questions about the flowers, about everything." John reached out to hold her hand, his voice trembling as he replied, "You can't blame yourself. None of us saw this coming." But his words offered little comfort. The truth was, everyone felt some measure of responsibility. Guests who had attended the wedding replayed the day in their minds, searching for signs they might have missed. Had someone brushed against the bouquet too casually? Was there a faint smell they hadn't paid attention to? Even the photographer, flipping through the images he had captured, wondered if he could have done something, anything, to intervene. Liam's siblings were similarly consumed by guilt. His younger sister, Claire, struggled to return to school, haunted by memories of teasing him about being nervous on his wedding day. "What if I made it worse?" she confided to her older brother, Daniel, during one particularly tearful conversation. "What if my jokes added to his stress?" Daniel tried to reassure her, reminding her that Liam had laughed along with her, but the doubt lingered. He himself wrestled with feelings of inadequacy, questioning whether he should have stepped. "And when Liam mentioned feeling uneasy during dinner, I thought it was just nerves," Daniel admitted bitterly. "How could I have been so blind?" The florist, Sarah Bennett, faced perhaps the harshest judgment of all. Once beloved in the community for her creativity and warmth, she now found herself ostracized, her name synonymous with tragedy. Her shop, once bustling with customers eager to order arrangements for birthdays, anniversaries, and holidays, stood empty, its windows dark and unwelcoming. Neighbors crossed the street to Avoid her gaze, and strangers hurled accusations online, calling her careless and reckless. Though many acknowledged that the supplier shared blame, Sarah became the face of the disaster, a scapegoat for a mistake that had spiraled out of control. Unable to face the hostility, Sarah retreated from public life entirely. She sold her business at a fraction of its value and moved to a small apartment on the outskirts of town, isolating herself from the world. Nights were the hardest. Sleep eluded her as visions of Emma and Liam danced in her mind, their smiling faces morphing into accusatory stares. During rare moments of clarity, she reminded herself that she hadn't acted out of malice. But logic offered little solace when weighed against the enormity of what had happened. "I'll never forgive myself," she murmured to her reflection one morning, tears streaming down her cheeks. How could anyone? Yet amid the overwhelming tide of grief and guilt, glimmers of hope began to emerge. Margaret, driven by a desire to honor Emma's memory, threw herself into advocacy work. She partnered with safety organizations to push for stricter regulations in the floral industry, lobbying lawmakers and speaking at conferences across the country. Her speeches, filled with raw emotion and determination, resonated deeply with audiences. No parent should have to bury their child because of a preventable mistake, she declared during one impassioned address. We owe it to Emma and Liam, and to everyone who loved them, to make sure this never happens again. Her efforts inspired others to join the cause. Friends of the couple organized fundraisers to support families affected by workplace accidents and oversights. Local businesses donated proceeds from sales, while schools held awareness campaigns to educate students about the importance of vigilance and accountability. Slowly but surely, the town began to rally around a shared mission, turning tragedy into action. Mrs. Thompson, whose warnings about omens had initially gone unheeded, found renewed purpose in comforting those touched by the loss. Known for her wisdom and gentle demeanor, she became a confidant for grieving family members and guilt-ridden guests alike. Sitting on her porch with a cup of tea, she listened patiently as people poured out their fears and regrets, offering words of reassurance without judgment. "We're all human," she often said, "and part of being human is making mistakes. What matters is how we learn from them." Even Claire, Liam's youngest sibling, discovered a way to channel her emotions into something meaningful. Inspired by her brother's love for tinkering with machines, she enrolled in an engineering program at a nearby college, determined to build devices that prioritized safety and reliability. "I want to create things that protect people," she explained to her professors during orientation. "Things that don't fail when it matters most." Her classmates admired her resilience, unaware of the personal tragedy fueling her ambition. As weeks turned into months, the town began to transform, not forgetting, but learning to live alongside the memory of Emma and Liam. The memorial garden, tended lovingly by volunteers, became a sanctuary for reflection and healing. Visitors left mementos beneath the plaque bearing the couple's names, handwritten notes, photographs, and trinkets that told stories of love and loss. On sunny afternoons, children played among the flowers, their laughter mingling with the soft rustle of leaves, a reminder that life continued, even in the shadow of heartbreak. On the first anniversary of the tragedy, the community gathered at the garden to pay tribute. Lanterns were released into the evening sky, their golden glow illuminating faces streaked with tears. Someone read aloud a letter written by Emma's best friend, Sarah, recalling the joy and laughter the couple had brought into everyone's lives. "They taught us what it means to love fully and fearlessly," she said, her voice breaking. "And though they're gone, their love remains with us, in the wind, in the waves, in every flower that blooms." For the families left behind, the ceremony provided a sense of closure, or at least, the beginning of acceptance. Margaret clung to John's arm as they walked through the garden afterward, pausing to touch the petals of a rose Emma had once sketched. "She would have loved this place," Margaret murmured, her voice tinged with both sadness and gratitude. Nearby, Claire knelt to place a small model airplane, a nod to Liam's childhood fascination with flight, at the base of the plaque. It was a quiet gesture, but one filled with meaning. Though the road ahead remained uncertain, the town had begun to find its footing again. Tragedy had tested them, forcing them to confront their vulnerabilities and shortcomings. But it had also revealed their capacity for compassion, resilience, and unity. In honoring Emma and Liam's memory, they had forged connections stronger than any single loss could sever. And while the wound of their passing would always remain, it served as a poignant reminder of the fragility and beauty of life itself. In the end, Emma and Liam's story wasn't just one of heartbreak, it was also one of transformation. Their love, though tragically cut short, had sparked a movement toward greater awareness, accountability, and care. Through their untimely deaths, they had become symbols of enduring hope, a testament to the power of love to transcend even the darkest moments. And as long as their memory lived on, so too did the promise of a brighter, safer future for all who followed in their footsteps. In the years that followed, Emma and Liam's story became more than just a tragic headline. It evolved into a legacy of love, resilience, and change. The small coastal town where their lives had intertwined so beautifully continued to honor them in ways both big and small. What began as an unimaginable loss transformed into a beacon of hope, inspiring countless individuals to live with greater purpose, cherish their loved ones more deeply, and advocate for safer practices in everyday life. The memorial garden nestled beside the ocean grew into a cherished landmark. It wasn't just a place of remembrance, but also a symbol of renewal, a testament to how even in the face of tragedy, beauty could bloom again. Visitors from neighboring towns and cities began traveling to see it, drawn by the stories they'd heard about Emma and Liam. Some came seeking solace after their own losses. Others simply wanted to pay respects to two souls whose love had touched so many. On any given day, you might find strangers sitting quietly on the benches, gazing out at the sea or reading the heartfelt messages left beneath the plaque. The garden had become a living tribute, a space where grief coexisted with gratitude. Each year, on the anniversary of their wedding, the community gathered to celebrate Emma and Liam's lives. The event was no longer somber, but rather filled with warmth and joy, reflecting the spirit of the couple themselves. Friends and family shared stories, laughter, and tears, painting vivid pictures of who Emma and Liam had been before fate intervened. Someone always brought out old photographs, snapshots of Emma sketching in her favorite cafe, Liam tinkering with engines in his garage, and the two of them dancing under strings of fairy lights. These images served as reminders of their vibrant personalities and the happiness they had brought to those around them. One tradition stood out above all: the release of lanterns into the night sky. As dusk fell, hundreds of glowing orbs ascended together, carrying wishes, prayers, and memories toward the stars. Children giggled as they helped light the candles inside, while adults stood silently, watching the lanterns drift higher and higher until they disappeared from view. Many believed these flickering lights carried messages to Emma and Liam, bridging the gap between this world and whatever lay beyond. "They're up there somewhere," one guest said during the third anniversary celebration, pointing toward the heavens. "And they're still watching over us." For Margaret and John, Emma's parents, the annual gathering provided moments of peace amidst the enduring ache of losing their daughter. Over time, they found comfort in seeing how Emma's memory lived on not only through the garden, but also through the advocacy work Margaret had spearheaded. Her efforts led to significant changes in safety regulations, particularly within the floral industry. New laws required rigorous inspections and clear labeling for potentially hazardous plants, ensuring that mistakes like the one that claimed Emma and Liam's lives would never happen again. Suppliers implemented stricter protocols, and florists underwent mandatory training programs designed to prevent similar oversights. Margaret often thought about how proud Emma would have been to see the impact of her advocacy. She imagined her daughter standing beside her at conferences, nodding approvingly as she spoke passionately about preventing future tragedies. "This is your legacy too," Margaret whispered aloud one evening while tending to the flowers in the garden. "You're still making the world a better place." Liam's siblings, Claire and Daniel, also found ways to keep his memory alive. Claire graduated top of her class in engineering, earning recognition for her innovative designs focused on safety mechanisms. One of her projects, an affordable air filtration system designed to detect harmful toxins, caught the attention of environmental organizations worldwide. When asked about her inspiration, she credited Liam's curiosity and determination. "He taught me to look for solutions instead of dwelling on problems," she explained during an interview. "I think he'd be proud of what I've done." Daniel, meanwhile, took on a leadership role in the local youth mentorship program, dedicating his free time to guiding teenagers navigating difficult circumstances. He often shared stories about Liam's kindness and humor, encouraging young people to embrace their strengths and support one another. "My brother believed in second chances," Daniel told a group of students during a workshop, "and I want to make sure everyone gets the chance to shine, just like he did." Even Sarah, the florist burdened by guilt, eventually found redemption. After years of isolation, she emerged from her self-imposed exile, driven by a desire to contribute positively to society. With the help of supportive friends, she started a non-profit organization aimed at educating florists and suppliers about safe practices. She traveled across the country giving seminars and workshops, sharing her story openly despite the pain it caused her. "If my mistakes can save someone else's child," she said during one presentation, "then maybe some good can come from this tragedy." Her honesty resonated deeply with audiences, earning her forgiveness and respect. As the years passed, the town itself seemed to heal alongside its residents. The once empty storefront where Sarah's flower shop had stood reopened under new ownership, this time specializing in sustainably sourced arrangements. Neighbors greeted each other warmly on the streets, united by a shared history of loss and recovery. Children played freely near the ocean, their laughter echoing against the cliffs, a sound that reminded everyone of life's preciousness. Yet, even as time softened the edges of grief, Emma and Liam remained ever present in the hearts of those who had known them. Their names appeared in conversations, their stories woven into the fabric of daily life. Couples planning weddings visited the memorial garden, leaving tokens of appreciation and vowing to cherish every moment with their partners. Teachers used Emma and Liam's story to teach students about accountability, empathy, and the importance of paying attention to details. Artists painted murals depicting their love, capturing the essence of two souls who had burned brightly, if briefly. On quiet nights, when the moon hung low over the water, and the wind carried the scent of salt and roses, some swore they felt Emma and Liam's presence. A sudden breeze brushing against their cheek, a distant laugh carried on the tide, or the faint rustle of leaves seemed like whispers from beyond. Whether real or imagined, these sensations offered comfort to those who needed it most, a reminder that love endures, transcending even death. Emma and Liam's story ultimately became a lesson in humanity's ability to rise above despair. Though their lives were tragically cut short, their legacy endured, inspiring acts of kindness, courage, and transformation. They had taught the world that love isn't measured by the length of time shared, but by the depth of connection forged. And as long as their memory lingered, in the waves crashing against the shore, in the petals of a blooming flower, in the laughter of strangers, they would continue to remind everyone fortunate enough to hear their tale. Cherish every moment, protect one another fiercely, and let love guide your way forward.